Welcome to Rhyme and Reason, hosted by Dr. Barry. Today, Barry welcomes addiction professional Megan Racer. And now, here's Dr. Barry Ryman.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode number 24 of Rhyme and Reason with Dr. Barry. I'm excited to have you guys here today. I'm excited for our guest today, who happens to have, in my opinion, the coolest last name of any guest we've had on the show. I mean, just a Megan Racer. It almost sounds like a nickname, like a superhero name. So hopefully, we're not going to speed. We're not going to speed through this podcast, but with a last name like that, you really never know what's going to happen, and I love it. So I'm happy to be back. I apologize again for our faithful listeners who were tuning in last week, waiting to hear Wesley Gear. Due to his travels to an exotic, undisclosed international island that he was on, he has been rescheduled, so you can mark your calendars for October 12th. Wesley will come on and share his story. This has been a whirlwind of a week so far. I am grateful to actually be home back in Fort Lauderdale. I have spent the past couple of nights in the beautiful city of Milwaukee, Wisconsin. One of my guests who was on the podcast a few weeks ago, Vin Baker from the Milwaukee Bucks, was hosting a charity golf tournament for his Bouncing Back Foundation. And I got to go up that way, play some golf, hang out with some cool people, enjoy some really, really nice weather. I woke up yesterday morning, came downstairs from my hotel, and it was about 67 degrees and sunny. And it was like, and listen, I'm speaking from a South Florida perspective. We can expect to see that weather for, I don't know, maybe 3 days this year, sometime probably in January. But it was really nice to get a taste of that. It was really gorgeous there. We had a really good time. We raised some money for a really good cause, helping people seek treatment that might not be able to afford it. So I'm going to get into, why we're here today. And we're here because I kind of took a shot in the dark. I did not know Megan. We were actually connected on Facebook and on LinkedIn, and I had followed her and her journey and admired her from a distance. I saw the wave she was making online and figured, you know what, let me just send a message and see if I can get her on the show. And she graciously agreed. She literally said yes right away. There was no excuse, not, I can't, let me do it. It was just, yes, when can I come on? So Megan actually got sober 4 years ago on July 20th of 2018. I believe that was actually the day I don't want to misquote this. I think we were just talking about it, but I can't remember what I ate for dinner last night, but I think she said it was either the last time she got arrested or when I don't know. Well, we're going to talk to her about that. But since that day, she has gone on to become a business development rep at the River Source, which I believe is in Arizona, and she's established quite the following on LinkedIn. So I'd like to welcome any of her LinkedIn guests that might be listening. I know she shared it out on her LinkedIn. She does use her platform to promote visibility for the recovery community, and we are really, really thankful to have her today on the Rhyme and Reason podcast. Greg, if you can bring her on, that would be freaking amazing. Hey!
Good morning.
All right, so before we get into all this, because I think I just might have messed up a little bit. The day you got clean, what is it? The last time you got arrested, when you got out of prison, when you went to prison? I was a little confused.
No, you're good. So the day I got sober was the day after my arrest. So the day I was arrested, I was loaded, and I ended up getting loaded in jail. And then, so the day after.
Wait, so you got arrested when you were loaded, went to jail, and then in jail found a way the first night you were in there to get loaded again?
So when I got arrested, the drugs.
Or did you sneak stuff in?
No, yeah. So what they didn't, they found whatever they found in the vehicle, right? But they didn't find what I had on me. So once they put me in the jail cell, I mean, I had quite a bit. I took it and I didn't really care what happened. At that point, I was in a jail cell by the Yuma border in Arizona. So whatever was going to happen was going to happen.
Was that your first time being arrested?
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
It was. And what did you go down on?
I was indicted on transportation and distribution charges. I was federally indicted.
What was it?
Methamphetamines.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
That's a good thing to transport and deliver.
Yeah. Yeah.
Easily concealable. I read a story the other day. I think it was somewhere in California. They used a classic car to carry like 500 kilos of methamphetamine or something.
Jeez.
It was like hidden all throughout the car.
Oh my gosh. No, it wasn't that much. I mean, it was a lot. It's a lot. There were 32 kilos of methamphetamine in the vehicle I was transporting. Comes out to like 89 pounds of meth.
Wow. And I know you're transparent and you're vocal and you're honest and you're out there and you don't hide things. You seem like a really nice woman, right? Mm-hmm. How do you get involved with transporting 89 pounds of methamphetamine? Were you working for Gus at Pollos Hermanos? Sorry, that's a Breaking Bad reference. Okay.
Right. Honestly, I guess it just comes like you have to go back to like the root cause of what was actually going on. It's not like I wanted to do something like that, but at the end of the day, like, I didn't want to continue to sell my body to get drugs. Mm-hmm. So this seemed like a more viable option to get out of, to really not go back into that kind of lifestyle as deep as I was when I first started using drugs and alcohol. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, things in life just weren't looking good. I had just quit, my job working for Maricopa County Superior Court like a month prior to that. I like cashed my 401k out. Obviously I spent all of that money. I was in active heroin addiction. And when you're in that world, you just know certain people and certain opportunities are presented to you. And it sounds like a good idea, right? It sounded like the most viable option that I had. When I did have like a loving family and support and all of that, just in my head, it was the only option that I could utilize outside.
So let's talk about that a little bit, because I want to get, I want to get to kind of where things went wrong, what things were like before, what your family life was like, because I'm a lot like you. I grew up in a loving family, and I don't know your story yet, but I can tell you that, my parents, they're still married today. They'll be married 55 years in December. And for me, I think my mom boned the milkman. Like, I don't know what happened, but I kept finding myself, in these positions that, and as we go through our active addiction, and we surround ourselves with other people who are kind of doing the same thing as us, we don't feel as bad about the stuff that we're doing, right? As long as people around us are kind of doing the same thing. And it gradually got worse and worse and worse, and, until there were kind of no more rungs left to climb. So what was your upbringing like? What did that look like? And then at what age did you kind of notice that things were starting to go in the wrong direction for you?
Yeah. So my upbringing, so we weren't like a touchy-feely kind of family, just my immediate family. Like, so my mom and my dad. My sister's 7 years younger than I am, so we didn't really have that close sisterly bond. For me, I just, from the moment I can really remember thoughts, I was just a very sad child. Like, I came into this world depressed. Like, for me, it was like figuring out what came first. Was it my mental health issues or was it the addiction? And I definitely know mental health has always been a major factor in my life. I just didn't know how to pinpoint that, or like I didn't really understand it. Like I went to therapy as a young child and then young adult. I just didn't grasp the magnitude that it would have on my life. And so growing up, just being depressed and not really like knowing how to people, I didn't understand the concept of like friendships. I didn't really understand the concept of like small talk and wanting to have conversations with people just to have conversations. Like I wanted substance behind it. And that was challenging as a young child when, I don't know, people were like, let's play, let's be silly. And I'm like, but I want to debate you. I want to, have like these long drawn out conversations. So it was hard to find my way as a young child in school. And then it was just kind of challenging at home too. I'm a lot like my father. He can kind of be emotionless. There's just not a lot of emotion that's there. And something that he has told me before is I have a lot of emotion, Megan. I just have a really challenging way of showing it. And that resonated with me. Like there's a ton of emotions going on in here. I just didn't know how to show people that and like receive it to myself. So I kind of just stayed a loner. I did well in school. My mom and dad had kind of a volatile relationship. There wasn't any physical abuse, but there was just a lot of like yelling and not getting along, and just me being like the rational thinker that I am as a child. It was like, well, why are you guys together? Like you should probably just separate. It would make this family dynamic a lot better. But I guess like in the whole, like in everything, my grandmother, my maternal grandma, that was like, she was my saving grace. Right? That was the person who instilled like these amazing morals and values in me and showed me just like what unconditional love looked like in a way that I understood. My mom unconditionally loves me. I just didn't understand it until I got older. My dad, same thing. I didn't recognize it, but with my grandmother, it was there. So I formed, she's like that. She was like that soulmate, that they talk about, that connection to human where it's just like, this is my person. So I guess things just turned around when I was around 17 and she passed away from lung cancer. So I no longer had that soul connection to anybody. And it was really sad, just kind of going through life, not really connecting with people or not understanding or, wanting this higher level of connection, but not knowing how to find the right people to have it with. So when I graduated high school, I met the first love of my life. Very attractive man, very fit. We met in the gym. I started working out a ton, like I guess my first drug of choice was adrenaline. Like we were always riding motorcycles, mountain biking, wakeboarding, doing, everything and anything to get that adrenaline up. So when I found exercise, it was like, this is perfect. Like I'm getting everything I need here, and I'm getting like that self-validation, and then I'm getting validation from others as well.
It's really cool that you bring that up. When we talk about addiction, we know it's more than just a drug, right? We know that, if you've been in any type of 12-step program and you go through a 4-step, the concept of actually taking that inventory is really looking at behaviors. And something I noticed is that those addictive tendencies were there in my life and present in my life way before I ever picked up a substance. Like we don't just do something to a minimum, right? We do it to a maximum and we get all in. And then usually, that'll last for however long it lasts. And then we find something else that we latch onto and we go all in with that. And then we find something else. So it's funny. It's not funny, but it's interesting that you bring that up. And for the listeners on here that are still kind of learning about addiction is that, the misconception is addiction is all about substance. And it's really not. It's a very small part of, the concept of, this disease model. So go ahead. Sorry for interrupting.
No, you're good. I 100% agree. The point I'm at in my sobriety currently, right? I'm in emotional sobriety. I'm working my steps on something completely different than if I were to have like first gotten sober, right? It just, my life today looks so much different. I have issues without drugs and alcohol. You know, like the drugs and alcohol just made it apparent to other people. Take those away, and then I start to see like, oh, I'm pretty manipulative. Like I make really poor impulsive choices. I utilize sex as a drug. Like I utilize people as a drug. So those were things like later on in sobriety that I really had to face and understand. If I don't get those under control, then like I'm going to go back out. I'm going to go to the source that makes me feel the best, the quickest, because those things will only work for so long. But when I started that relationship, you know, I found worth. I finally found worth in myself because somebody else found worth in me. And that just was never a foundation that was instilled in me as a young girl. You know, like we know what we know. We get our core values and our core beliefs from the people that raise us. And it was very challenging for my mom to find self-worth. And so I just didn't have a good teacher to do that for self. So when I found this man, it was like, oh my gosh, this is the person of my dreams. He's so attractive. So many people want him. He's so smart. You know what I mean? Like all of these amazing qualities about him. And it was never about like, what are good qualities of me, you know? And I put my value in him. He became my God, right? And you can only imagine like, it's not sustainable, especially when he was a sick and suffering person too, right? Like I didn't know much about addiction, but he's an addict. He was an addict, right? And I remember one night, like I never did drugs. I drank a lot as a young child, but that was like socially acceptable. It was kind of just what we did. And it was never like overboard in excess, anything like that. It never affected like my school. But when I met him, you know, one night I remember I just got off work. He came home and he was late and he was like, hey, I got us something. I'm like, okay, cool. So he grabs like the baggie that he has and he puts like the whole thing of Coke on the table. And I just remember like, you know, back in the day, I would have been like, absolutely not. Like I wouldn't have gotten the butterflies. It wasn't a good idea. I knew that like alcoholism ran in my family. I'm going to stay away from that. But when he brought it in, like he introduced it, again, this is my God. He's bringing me something. And like immediately I see it and I get just these butterflies of like, oh, okay, this is going to be fun. Like this is it. And so, you know, I'm looking at the Coke and it's a decent amount of cocaine, right? And immediately in my head, before even trying it, I just thought like, this isn't going to be enough for the two of us for tonight.
Wow.
You know, like I had never tried a drug in my life. Like, so, and I was right. Like, you know, the first line down, the first time I ever ingested any kind of hardcore drug, something clicked. It clicked before I even put it in my body. And then once it was in my body, it clicked for my body as well. And, you know, the obsession completely started that night. Like I didn't go out and buy or seek the drug, but, you know, I looked forward to the nights where I would be surprised we got it. And a couple weeks later, I remember I was like in the shower and he got back and again, he was late and he was like, okay, I need you to open your mouth. Okay, what do you got? And back then, you know, they were the M30s, the like pharmaceutical grade perks. And he gives me half a pill and he's like, take this. And I was, you know, completely willing. Again, this person, like, why would he want to, you know, see any like harm happen to me? And so I took it and like, that was a whole different ball game. Like that felt like home. That felt like that feeling where, you know, most of my life, I didn't really want to live. Like I didn't want to die, right? Like I didn't want to kill myself. I didn't have thoughts of that, but also like, I just didn't want to wake up every day and be me. And so taking that pill was like, okay, cool. This is how normal people feel and function. This is what it's supposed to feel like. Yeah. And I mean, again, like that obsession kicked in and life just became mentally thinking about getting high.
So this was introduction to
Mhm.
part two of your life, we'll call it, right?
Yeah.
And I relate a lot to what you've shared. You know, we have these beliefs as a child that we'll never do anything. And then even as we get older, okay, maybe I'll drink and maybe I'll smoke a little weed, but cocaine. I remember being, I don't know, I think I was about 15 years old, 10th grade, and I went to a Dolphin game, and it was a Monday night football game. And this was back in the early 90s. The Dolphins were actually a good team. So
Mhm.
there was like a lot of hype, a lot of people there. And we were sitting in these seats, and there was a guy who sat next to me. And every time the Dolphins scored a touchdown or kicked a field goal and everybody got up to cheer, I would glance down at him, and he had this little baggie and he had like a long fingernail, right? He had
Yeah.
the old fingernail, and he was dipping his finger into this bag and, snorting up this cocaine. And it was the first time that I was 14 or 15 years old that I saw, and I was genuinely afraid to be sitting next to this guy. Like that was my mindset of, and then just, you know, 2 years later, I'm driving 200 miles to pick up 3/4 of a pound of cocaine to transport it back to my college. Like there's something that happens that isn't normal, right? And I use the analogy too, the difference between an addict and a non-addict, right? There are people who can recreationally use cocaine. We're going to put that out there, okay? There are people, a group of 4 people that can buy a gram on New Year's, do it all night, and still have a half a gram left and stick it in the drawer until next year, okay? You give me like an 8 ball and I do one line out of it, and my mind is it's almost gone.
Mhm.
Right there's a complete shift, and there's a distinct difference in the person who is afflicted with the disease of more, right? But the best way I could describe it, and Megan, let me know if you relate to this or not, but growing up, I could pretty much fit in with anybody, but I never really felt like I quite fit. Okay.
Mhm.
I was what I would call a chameleon. Okay. I could dress a certain way. I could talk a certain way. I could play a certain sport. I could do a certain thing that I was going to fit in with a multitude of groups, but I never really felt like I quite fit until I found those harder drugs and I felt home.
Mhm.
And that description of that M30, I believe you called it, um, it's like getting a hug from God.
Mhm.
There's really like no other way to describe it. Where I remember getting into ecstasy at some point when I was away at school. I was at UF, and this was probably 1993, and they had these pressed pills with these brown dots, which I later found out were heroin. And I remembered taking it for the first time, and my first thought was, everybody in this fucking world needs to be on this. Like I was trying to plot ways to slip this into my parents' drinks so they could just experience, the feeling I was having, so they would just get it, and then we could all do ecstasy together. Like, so, there's a lot of irrational thinking that happens once we find home.
Mhm.
And for you, based off your family history and the way you describe it, like that introduction from Prince Charming to part two of your life was really, you found home.
Mhm.
You found a home that you felt like you fit. And I'm sure that there's listeners out there right now that can relate to that. Right. And so, how long did this relationship with Prince Charming go on?
Mm. We were together for probably a little over 3 years. So there was a lot of using in there. Most of it was just him getting what we needed, right? And I mean, he just came from such a good family. Like I still am, close with his parents to this day. Or
Are
like
you really? Where is he now?
he actually passed away.
He did.
He did.
That's sad.
Yeah. So with him, it was like a 3-year thing. We were engaged. It was a very, like, that was my first experience with like physical abuse. And, you know, I didn't see that stuff at home. And so like, I don't know what rationally made my brain think like what was happening was okay. But I guess the first time it ever happened, I swept it under the rug and acted like everything was fine. So after that, like once that happens, then, you know, it's going to continue to happen. But yeah, that was just a relationship that pretty much formed the rest of my life and my understanding of what men are. I've had to, you know, recently I've had to do a lot of internal change when it comes to men. But so he traveled for his job, right? So he ended up meeting a woman at a strip club in California when he was on a job out there. And so when I confronted him about that, you know, he didn't want to admit it, but I was just like, okay, well, I'm done. And he ended up moving out to California like a couple weeks after that and moved in with her and they got married. I'm kind of like that Good Luck Chuck movie. I swear. Most relationships, like every relationship that I've been in that has not worked out, like they end up getting married right after. So
that's a pretty cool title to have. I mean, that's a, you know, maybe there's something to that.
I don't know, but
you could start marketing yourself, you know, for all the hopeless women out there. You know, like, I'm getting them ready for you.
Right. Yeah, like I guess during that relationship with him, you know, I was in college. Like I was going to college for criminal justice. I wanted to be an attorney. Like that was my lifelong dream, was to be an attorney. Like I could get paid to argue with people. Fantastic. You know? So I went to Arizona State University for criminal justice. And during that time, like this was a pretty heavy using period for me. So I'm like trying to do college, like my senior year, I got pretty heavy into drugs. By my senior year, I got pregnant with my daughter. I like had 3 credits to get my bachelor's and I dropped out. Like, I have my daughter, and that's kind of where my using got really bad. Was 2 months after I had my daughter, I switched to heroin. But like during my college time, right? So I'm going for criminal justice and I'm in a criminology class. And so part of the criminology class is like learning the difference between a state and a federal crime, and like state jail, prison, and federal jails and prisons. So one of the things that we got to do was like go out to different jails, different prisons, and, you know, just do tours. Well, one of the prisons that's out here in Arizona, there's a medium security men's federal holding or federal prison, and then there's a minimum for women. And that's one of the facilities that I toured. And that was actually the facility that I was incarcerated in.
Wow.
Several years later. A
little foreshadowing there.
Right. And it's like, you know, everything. It's just, that was a couple miles away from literally my backyard that I grew up in, right? Like I grew up in the desert. So it was a very humbling experience going to prison because it was exactly where I grew up.
In the desert,
you know.
Did you ride through there on a horse with no name?
A little horse with no name, right? Well, you know, there were times where I was like, is that my dad on his dirt bike? Like, I don't know.
Riding through the desert on a horse with no name, and it's good to get out of the rain. Okay, so take me to your bottom.
Bottom.
Take me to your bottom. Take me to your bottom, to your moment of clarity. I know it ends in arrest, but you know, take me through those last couple weeks.
Okay. So by the time I got really bad, you know, I was an IV heroin user, meth, and, you know, pretty bad alcohol problem too at that point. It was I was using about a gram of heroin a day. I only allotted myself a gram because if I got more, I would use more, right? And then alcohol and meth kind of fell into there if I could find the funds for that. I was a single mom of 2 kids at that point. So where I was at, my kids were at. So they endured a lot of sitting in the car waiting with me, or a lot of time mom was in the bathroom getting high, and like the image that's always like been seared into my brain and is just like trying to hit a vein and seeing my kids like little fingers underneath the door because like they want to know where their mom's at. And like I'm trying to shield my family as much as I can from what's internally going on and what I'm doing. But, there's a cost. There's always going to be a cost. There's going to be a cost to myself, and there's going to be a cost to the people that love me and need me to live.
How old were they at this point?
Towards the end, I think my son was around 2 years old. So my daughter was about 5. So my son doesn't really remember much, if anything. My daughter remembers everything. Mm-hmm. She, she talks to me about like things, and I like to talk to her about it. I like to get her insight on like what she knew to be true. Like, I just like to ask her questions about it, and I want her to know she has a safe space to talk about it, and if she needs to vent or whatever. And she always like shuts me down, I guess. She'll go, Mom, like, that's the past. You're not that person anymore. And you're who you are today. And I love both of you. She's just so smart and so intuitive and insightful and so forgiving. And like that unconditional love that comes from this tiny human is what helped me love myself.
Maybe she has your grandma's gene.
She saved my life. I don't think I would have wanted to make it through the situation that I would put myself in if it wasn't for like her unconditional love and her support. But yeah, so towards the end, like I said, my kids came everywhere with me. So I was presented with an opportunity to work with some people in Mexico, and my kids came with me. They put us up in a hotel, and we were to discuss like what was going to happen. Nothing was really discussed over the phone. When I got down there, I think I was there for about a week and a half, and future plans were being discussed of transporting, lots of drugs. Like, we're going to get this big RV, like the whole thing. Right. And so they gave me a truck. I registered that truck when, like, obviously I was in Mexico. I registered the truck, like crossing the border in Arizona, came back and just did a couple of crossings without anything in there. The last crossing that I did, they sent me to secondary, which is like a more intensive check of what's going on. Because obviously I look really suspicious, right? I'm like 120 pounds, sunken in, picked out, and my veins look horrible. And so of course they send me to secondary, and I let the people that had me down there, let them know like, hey, this vehicle probably isn't going to be a good one. I just got hit on secondary. Like, I can't do any transporting right now. They're just like, don't worry about it. We're going to actually have you, go to California. We'll have you pick up some money, drive that back down, and then, then we'll start with transporting drugs. So I was like, okay. Again, kids are with me this whole time. I've put them in the most dangerous situation. And in the beginning of like getting sober, I literally tormented myself to just an insane amount with like, what if this happened, Megan? What if this happened? What if this happened? Like everything and anything wrong that could have happened, I I sat up all night just thinking about that, crying, or, just telling myself how horrible of a mother I am, what a horrible person I am. How could you do this? This is in clarity, right? But in active addiction, it just made sense.
Mm-hmm.
It just made sense. So things that I tell people, right? It's you can choose to continue to get high. That's your choice. But know the things that you do in active addiction, you're going to have to face when you get sober. And sometimes the things we do in active addiction, we can't handle when we're sober, or we don't have the tools, or you're just not going to be willing enough to look at the shit that you did. So remember that. Because I know it took a long time for me to process and accept what I did and move forward and be okay with the decisions that I had made then, knowing that that's not who I am today. That does not define me.
Very well said. So you went to California, you picked up money, you brought it back to Mexico?
We never got there. So that was the plan, right? So I left one night at 11 o'clock. The vehicle that they ended up giving me had some mechanical issues. So they took it to the shop one night, brought it back. And a day later, I ended up leaving. So the night that I left, they ask you questions when you go to the border, right? When you meet the Border Patrol agent, and it's just a BS story that I'm telling them as to why I'm in Mexico. And they're go to secondary. So I'm okay, not a big deal. I'd already been to secondary and was able to leave. So when I go to secondary this time, they've got the drug dog out again. And I see the dog sitting down, and I see all these people coming towards the vehicle. And I'm oh, this doesn't seem good. My brain's not clicking that something is about to go down. Your life's about to change for the rest, forever. And so all these agents come towards the car. All these agents are coming towards me and my kids. And they bring me to this cell area that's right in the front office. And, I'm not being cooperative. I'm not understanding what's going on. And
you had no idea that there were drugs in there?
No.
You just, okay. So that whole car going to the shop for mechanical issues was them loading the drugs into compartments?
Yeah.
Okay.
But,
I watch these shows. Border Town Laredo,
right.
Border Wars.
I'd love to say yeah, I knew there were drugs in my vehicle because I wouldn't look like such an idiot.
Yeah.
But that's just not the case. So the agents come and I'm not being cooperative, and they're well, listen, we can either put handcuffs on you in front of your kids, or we can take them, put them in a safe location and search you. And I was okay. So they took my kids, and, they were wonderful with them. They made them as secure and safe as possible, safer than I was able to do. And, they searched me and they found a needle on me, but that was about it. They didn't find the rest of the drugs that I had on me. And I get put back in the jail cell. And I just remember the cell door closing. And again, I'm not understanding what's going on, but I felt free. I felt more free than I've ever felt in my life. It just was, the madness was over. This was
you were saved.
Yeah, it was a good 2-year run that I was using at that point, because I had been sober prior to that, right? I relapsed with the kid's father, and it's just a whole situation. But 2 years of just pretending to be something I'm not was draining. I was working for the Superior Court, getting loaded, I remember just bringing my rig and my spoon, and I had a full cup of Fireball on ice, and just bringing that all into the courthouse, just not even understanding what I'm doing. I'm cooking up shots inside the bathroom at the courthouse, missing, one time there were just so many bad moments. I was living 2 separate lives, trying to pretend to be this good citizen, knowing damn well that I'm about to shoot up in the bathroom while like these people are entrusting me with a lot. So when that jail door finally closed, it was like you said, I was saved. It was over. I knew it was over. I knew it was finally done.
I didn't know how this whole story went down, and I'm glad you shared it. And I'm sure it's difficult to talk about, because you're getting very vulnerable, right? We all want to put our best face forward at all times and not talk about kids being involved and this, that, and the other. So that's a really difficult situation, but you're not alone, right? You're not alone. And there has been, I was told very early in my recovery, I'm clean now over 26 years, and there's little things that I've heard along the way, right? And one of the things I've heard, I think I heard it when I had like a year clean and I was getting ready to do my 4-step. And I said to my sponsor, like, man, I have some stuff on here that I really just don't want to put down on paper, that I'm really ashamed about. And, it was told to me at that point that if there's a name for it, it's already been done. Mm-hmm. Meaning if you can describe it with a name, if you could say, I did this, and someone's already done it. Right. And as simple as that sounded, it was hugely impactful on my experience going through the steps, because I didn't feel like a leper. I didn't feel like the biggest piece of crap that ever walked the face of the earth. Even though I might have felt like that, I knew I wasn't. And so, there's a lot of things that we do, before getting sober that, in a million years living in sobriety, you would never do those things. And let's not get it twisted. There's also a lot of things that we've done in sobriety that, as time progresses, we probably won't do anymore. But, we don't get clean to get perfect. But at the same time, this is the key to freedom. Mm-hmm. We have like 20 minutes left.
Okay.
And so I want to get into the hope side, because you have like an incredible story. Okay. And I have no doubt in my mind that you probably needed to go through every single thing you went through to be where you are today. And I can't wait to hear what your life looks like today. You are a walking miracle, and I'm sure anybody who's listening recognizes that, because you really, let's call a spade, Megan. You are transporting drugs for a cartel with your kids in the backseat. Okay. That's forget about all the other stuff you were doing. Forget about intravenous drug use. Forget about selling your body. You were transporting drugs for a Mexican cartel, across borders, going on runs, going for like a week and a half a time to Mexico because you couldn't talk over the phone. That's some pretty serious shit.
Yeah.
So we're gonna.
Right. Everybody does that.
I prefer the Colombian drug cartels personally, because Colombia is a little nicer than Mexico, but still, I live in the Miami area, so we just go through the water. We don't drive through borders.
Right. Well, Mexico is 4.5 hour drive.
Yeah. Oh, it's totally doable and easily to rationalize. That's like me driving to a little past Disney. All right. Mm-hmm. So, how did you start to? Let's say this: you've been clean now or sober now for 4 years. Mm-hmm. In July. Okay, so you recently celebrated. I'm a June birthday. I'm a June sober day. You're in July. I'm the 19th. I think you said you're the 20th.
Okay, so a month apart.
Yeah, we're a month apart.
A month and some years, but
a few years, a little bit.
A few.
But we're summer. We're we got our rocks off in the summer and got clean in the summer. All right. So when did you start recognizing that you had the gift to help others? When did you start to recognize that your story would impact and change the lives of other people?
So, well, okay. So luckily, when I was federally indicted, I went to prison, right? I went to prison with the feds, and they do it a little different than the state does, right? Like they do help with like a drug program. So I did a drug program when I was in prison. I did rehab before that. So it was about a 2.5 year period of like intense drug rehabilitation. And it wasn't, again, it's not about the drugs. Like it was focused on cognitive behavioral therapy, right? If you change the way you think, you change the way you feel, and you change the outcomes. You change how you respond, react, don't react, all of that. Concept was so simple that like my complex brain was just like, this can't work. Like my depression is so great that like me changing my thought patterns could never work until like I let my ego step aside, and it's like, it's not that big of a problem. This is a simple solution to something you've made up in your head that's so great. So when I realized, like, if I get down to every core belief that I have, or if I try to get down to every core belief I have, I change my perspective on everything. Like, I don't just want to change like bits and pieces of like my thought patterns. Like, I want to know why I think that way, and I want to get down to my belief system. And for me, it was understanding that at the core of everything, I'm a victim. At the core of everything, I have no self-worth. At the core of everything, like, manipulation has been my tool to utilize to make myself feel better my entire life. So when I looked at those like 3 like key factors in my life, I had to figure out, well, how do I turn something that is so ingrained in me into an asset? Do I completely eradicate it, or do I utilize it in a way that's going to benefit myself and others? So I had to figure out, like, number one thing was like, I'm manipulative. How do I take that and use it as an asset in my life? So I had to have a lot of people call me on my shit. I had to have a lot of people give me constructive feedback and listen to it and understand that they weren't doing it, whatever place they were doing it from, right? Doesn't matter. If the suggestion was a good one, utilize it and change. It was pretty just like cut and dry, right? Like you can either sit in your shit for however long you choose, or you can feel better, change your thought process, figure out why you're doing what you're doing, and do something better. And it was like, honestly, that simple. I just had to make the choice to do it. And so coming out of prison, I got to work in treatment. So I had a felony, I had a class FB felony. I felt like, who's going to want to hire me? I'm never going to get into the system I was working in previously, and working in treatment had always been something I wanted to do. So I took like that basic job of working overnights as a BHT, like progressed to case management, progressed to admissions, progressed to outreach, business development. Like, this is all within the span of 1.5 years of like working in treatment. So going back to that manipulation piece, right? Like I figured out that I can use that to my advantage and to the advantage of others, where it's like, I'm able to facilitate or redirect these behaviors. I have a really good way of doing that, just sitting down with a patient, meeting them where they're at, and like just laying it out pretty cut and dry to them to a way where they can change the way they think. It's just this like, it's like this light that protrudes, and you're just giving people a different way of perceiving their reality. And that's what it was for me. I just had to perceive my reality so different. Somebody, they told me that, Megan, you see the world through these lenses that are on your face as a victim. You're not a victim. You're not special. Nothing about you is inherently bad. Nothing about you is inherently good. You were just you. And it was like, prison was that humility piece I needed to get to where I am. So you're absolutely right. I needed to go through what I went through to start living in my purpose. My purpose was being created through my active addiction in prison, and then building a foundation on like just living 100% in my purpose. My purpose is to bring awareness to like addiction, mental health, possibly, prison, like what it looks like to be in prison, what kind of changes could we implement, things like that. It's just showing people that you can make poor choices in your life, right? Those poor choices don't define who you are. I'm not a bad mom. I've made some pretty poor choices as a mom. Absolutely. 100% will admit that. And until I could reframe the way I told myself things and the way I saw myself, like nothing was going to change. So if I can take the shame that I felt, right, detach myself from it, understand like there's good, healthy guilt to have out of what I've done, and it's brought humility to my life, then like I don't have to feel shame over it, because shame's going to kill me. Like
everything you're saying is so textbookly perfectly well said, right? I mean, like the concept whenever I sit down with a client is not about convincing them that they don't enjoy getting high, right? That they don't enjoy drugs. The concept of entering into recovery is helping them understand how great their life can be if they put that one thing down, right? And so that's something I feel passionately about. Now, you have a pretty big presence on LinkedIn. How did that come about?
Well, I started my LinkedIn last year in like November when I started doing business development, and I started putting stuff out there that was honest. And people were just shocked, blown away by like, oh my gosh, you're being like, you're telling this stuff. And it's like, well, absolutely. Like, this is what I do on a daily basis. Like, I found a job where I get to talk about my felonies and my addiction and all of that, right? Where it's like promoted. Like, I specifically put myself in a field where I don't have to be ashamed of like my actions, and what I have done and the choices I made can be an impactful thing for others. Like, there's strategic planning in all of that. So with LinkedIn, it was, I just share my truth. Like, I shared about my past, and I shared about like what I'm doing today, and just like motivational things. And what I have found is that there is such a need for positive reinforcement and positive feedback in people's lives. They want it so bad. And it's apparent, it's apparent in the things that I write and the responses that I get back from it. Just thousands of people in support of like somebody like me. It just shows me that people are a lot more open-minded and understanding than I ever gave them credit for. So it's like, not only does it help others, like it helps me have a different understanding for people.
And I'd be remiss if I didn't bring up your TikTok. Tell us a little bit about your TikTok, because you seem like you have a pretty big following on there too. I might have found you.
I have a decent following. So my TikTok, like when I got out of prison, that was like right when COVID hit. So I got out and, I had to go to a halfway house. Like, I was still an inmate, but I was like out in the real world. And TikTok was like, it helped me stay sane. I think it helped a lot of people stay sane during that time. So I built my following while I was in a federal halfway house doing TikTok.
How interesting is that?
But again, it's just like sharing my reality, sharing my truths. Like I mix a lot of different things in there, and just, things that I'm interested in pursuing. And
people like real and genuine. I mean, that's what it all boils down to. Okay. I've been on LinkedIn now, actively on LinkedIn. I started pretty much like right before COVID, and I had joined this, what we called a LinkedIn mastermind group with some pretty like quote unquote heavy hitters on LinkedIn, with Shanae Moret and Rachel Mitchell and Chris. I can't remember his last name. And we were meeting like once a week in person, like at Chris's office, kind of just talking about the importance of LinkedIn. And Rachel Mitchell was in this group as kind of like a person like me that had no followers whatsoever. And she was actually supposed to be on this podcast too, and had to reschedule, but she's like approaching 1 million followers at this point. And
Yes.
yeah, and it's really awe-inspiring. I mean, I only have like 12,000. Okay. So I'm not, and I have to say over the last probably 6 to 9 months since the world came back, like I posted every day for over a year, like throughout the pandemic. And I think I was way more active. And then just like everything, I get busy and move and got a lot of stuff going on. And I'm calling myself out right now because I need to become back being more active on there, because I just think it's a good tool to provide hope to people, right? And there's such a diverse group of like Facebook, right? This is
Oh
an
no.
international, and when we talk about international, as much as it is a networking and business type site, I've made a number of really good connections, that have turned into friendships, right? That people I genuinely like talking to, and there's some people who mistake LinkedIn for being a dating app, and I'm sure you have had to deal with that as a woman probably more than I have had to deal with that as a male, even though it's happened to me a few times. So I think that there's boundaries that need to be set. Tell
Oh,
me, go and what have you had experience with that? I'm assuming yes.
yeah, I mean, I'm going to do my LinkedIn however I see fit, right? Whatever is within my personal like comfort zone. And that doesn't necessarily mean others are comfortable with it. That's totally fine. I don't condemn anybody for, asking for a date or wanting to meet or anything like that, right? I think it's flattering. It's not, it's not going to happen, but I really think it's flattering. And I honestly, like the messages that I get, right? I get messages from CEOs and just owners of companies, things like that, right? And they're just like, listen, your post today, it really resonated with me. Like, I'm really struggling with my mental health. I'm struggling with alcohol, whatever it is. Like, thank you. Like people don't see the side of like the thousands of messages that I get about people that find hope in what's being said.
I
And
love that.
not everybody's going to agree with what I'm posting. And like, I don't care. Like,
Yeah, you listen,
I just
you
don't.
have to, yeah, you have to be you. And I've seen those posts where people get raw and vulnerable, and then some of the comments are,
Yeah.
"This isn't Facebook, this
Right.
isn't, Instagram," and I just say fuck off.
Oh,
So
absolutely. And it's, they're not going to understand the brand that I'm trying to build, or they're not going to understand what I'm trying to build. And that's not for them to understand. If I can reach one person and help them through whatever they're freaking going through, like the rest is whatever. Like I'm living in my purpose. My job is to help people find recovery from active using and for their mental health, period. However that comes about, like let it come about.
so you
I'm
have
getting,
you and we're coming up on, we
yeah.
got a couple minutes here. You have your 4 years now. What does your life look like today?
Oh, my life today. So I have my kids full time. I got them back in my life as soon as I got out of the halfway house. Full-time mom. I have a full-time career. I have a really awesome partner in my life today, which is, it's mind blowing. Like all the promises have come true, and anything and everything I could have thought of that I would want my life to be has been surpassed in the last 2 years that I've been out of prison. Like there are no words to put to like the blessings that have come from a humbled heart. and obviously like working the steps, and like I was mandated to do therapy, which good on them, right? Needed that. The life today is just genuinely happiness. There's
Your
like
family must be so proud.
oh my God, they come to me for advice. Come on. Like they're like, like the person that they locked their doors and armed their house for, they are now like, Megan, I need some advice on something that's going on. So it's it's beyond my wildest dreams, and it's only
Yeah,
getting better.
Megan, I got a call from the Mexican drug cartel, and they're wanting me to. What do you think?
Oh, yeah.
Sorry, I had to bring that up one more time. I think it's awesome. So, if you want to give a shout out to the treatment center you represent, talk for 15, 20 seconds about kind of what you guys do in Arizona.
Yeah, I work for the River Source. We are a drug and alcohol treatment center. We also deal with co-occurring disorders. We do in-network commercial insurance, and it's a full continuum of care. So detox, residential, PHP, IOP.
Perfect. And Greg, if you could put up a link as we close the show, so how people can find Megan off of here. She is happily partnered, so no date requests. And I'm just putting that out to the LinkedIn people that are listening. Listen, this was really awesome to have you on here. I will tell you, like, what a story of hope.
Oh boy. Yeah.
What a story of hope. I mean, this is just from where you were, from how you came into this world. You talked about being depressed as a kid, which I think is something important to talk about because some people don't even recognize when their kids are depressed. Mm-hmm. To the love you got from your maternal grandma, right? The unconditional love. And what she instilled in you at that point was never lost. Okay, because you're now instilling that, and I'm willing to bet you're now instilling that in your kids. Mm-hmm. And it seems like your oldest got that gene as well. So thank God for unconditional love. Megan, thank you so much for being on. You were awesome.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you.